Good morning, everybody, and welcome to IGTV. This is a production of New York City InfraGard. With us today, we'll be interviewing Gary C. Kessler of Gary Kessler Associates, up from the Vermont InfraGard Alliance. Let's welcome Gary onto the program. Good morning, Gary. Can you hear us?
I can hear you just fine.
All right, that's terrific. Let's bring you the full view so everybody can kind of see who you are. All right, and then we'll put your name underneath there. That way, just in case they forget, we can remind them by that.
That'll remember.
Gary, you're in the middle of an interesting project, which you and I have discussed just briefly, with a book that's coming out by Elsevier. And Elsevier is known to the industry as a major technology producer of different periodicals, articles, and certainly books. We've got enough of them here in New York as well. So I guess welcome to the fold, huh?
Well, thanks.
Yeah. This book is due out. It'll be selected topics in computer science sometime during the spring. So for our members and anyone else who's hearing this, you can turn over to Elsevier and hunt down selected topics in computer science. Gary is a longtime member of the InfraGard program, coming from our Vermont Alliance, as I mentioned, and certainly very prolific in this, adjunct teaching down in Perth, Australia, as well as Champlain College up in Vermont. So Gary, welcome. You've got a chapter in the book, and I guess you're not going to go too far from what you're used to. You're very familiar in the computer forensics area. Why don't you give us a little background? What's going on with this book?
Well, the chapter in the book is about steganography, which I co-wrote with Chet Hosmer from Whetstone Technologies, and actually, one of the reasons I contacted you and was talking to you about providing the presentation here is I've talked to the Vermont InfraGard chapter about stego before, and of course, last summer, big news in New York when the feds busted a ring of Russian spies, alleged Russian spies, who, among other things, were apparently using steganography to communicate with each other. And while stego certainly has been well known in the information security and forensics industry for quite a while, and as a technology has been used for thousands of years, I think this is the first time it really hit mainstream media.
All right, Gary. Let me just see if I can set this up over here correctly too. Okay, so I'll put us both on main screen now. So we know there's a lot been going on in the stego area, especially when it came to terrorism. Initially, people were afraid that they were going to be sending covert messages through pitches and things of that nature, and stego laying behind there. Why don't you kind of give us the definition? What's the difference between stego and crypto?
Well, in a nutshell, steganography, if one translates from the Greek and all that kind of stuff, and they always do, means hidden writing, as opposed to cryptography, which means secret writing. So most of us are familiar with crypto. I send you an encoded message, you have the key, you can decrypt it, that kind of stuff. In steganography, really what I'm trying to create is a covert communications channel. When I send you an encrypted message, a third party who stumbles upon that message may see it, and they may know it's encrypted, but presumably they can't break the encryption. With steganography, I want to have a communication with you, and I want it to be in such a way that no third party, even if they stumble upon it, knows that you and I are communicating. So that's one of the significant differences between stego and crypto.
Okay, so let's move down the line then. What's the difference between stego and digital watermarking?
Well, in digital steganography, which is to say when I'm using a digital file as the carrier, and that's one of the terms that we'll use in steganography. I have, let's say, some contents of data, and what I'm going to do is put my hidden message inside those contents. The file with the contents is the carrier file. So let's just take a photograph. Suppose I'm somebody who sells photographs. Well, I would like to post my photographs on my website, but I don't want somebody to come down, download the photographs, and then use them for their own purposes. So what will frequently happen, and you see this on a lot of websites, somebody will put their copyright notice on an image, but the copyright notice is actually visible.
Okay.
That's a digital watermark. Now, digital watermarks differ from digital steganography in a number of significant ways, not the least of which is that digital watermarks tend to be small in terms of content. They also tend to repeat. So for example, if you look at a Google map, on some images you may see something that says copyright Google. You may see that, you know, half dozen times on one image. So it tends to be the same content, small quantity, it's repeated, and it's intended to be removed. With steganography, I can usually hide an amount of information in a digital carrier file that's largely dependent upon the size of the file. And so it may be small amounts of text, maybe large amounts of text, or large images inside of other images.
And it could also be encrypted, an encrypted file within an image, correct?
Absolutely. So on top of everything else, one of the problems we frequently face with stego is that not only may there be hidden content, but once I find the hidden content, I then have the second problem of how do I decrypt it.
Yeah, so it can get very complicated very quickly. Hey, hey Gary, just for our listeners' benefit here, because this is truly educational material here. Can you give us a list of what are the different types of stego?
Well, actually, what we have in the book is sort of a tree diagram, and but I'll try not to read you the tree diagram. There are actually lots of different types of stego. And actually, one of the things I probably ought to say before going into this too much is a little bit about classical stego versus the digital stego that we run across when we're working with people that, you know, have computers and all.
Okay.
Stego has been around probably since soon after people figured out how to write. So again, it only refers to the ability to have a covert communications channel and hidden writing. And that is something that, again, people have been doing now for hundreds, if not thousands of years. And stuff as simple, well, it's simple. Back in a simpler time, one of the classic ways of doing stego was when people had slaves, you know, one king would get one of his slaves, shave the hair off the slave, tattoo a message on the scalp, wait till the hair grew back, and then send the slave to the other king he wanted to communicate with. But one of the things that points to is the fact that stego only works as a covert channel when both the sender and receiver know that there's the covert channel. But now, in a more broad sense for the digital world, or at least the more current world, is you can do stego actually in digital carriers by hiding content inside of pretty much any type of digital file and pretty much any type of content. But stego can also be simple things like the clothes I'm wearing today could convey a message. An image on a website and the orientation of the image. Several years ago I was giving a talk on stego, and somebody who worked for one of the federal agencies was telling me about the fact that they were looking at one of the Al-Qaeda, or, well, it was one of the Al-Qaeda websites, and there was an image one day of a woman holding up an AK-47 in her right hand. So something, you know, like this. And the next day was the exact same picture, but she was holding up the AK-47 with her left hand. Now, was that a signal to somebody for something? Who knows? Did it drive a bunch of people crazy while they tried to figure it out? No, I suspect it did. But in fact, the orientation of things in a picture, again, I've mentioned the clothing that someone wears, all of that are classifications of stego. One of the things that I observe also as stego is there's lots of ways of doing stego in very, very low tech. And it's probably just worth mentioning really quickly. You know, I can send somebody a PowerPoint presentation of anything. And most people look at the PowerPoint presentation, they get out of what they want to get out of it. Now, it's absolutely conceivable that I could send you a PowerPoint presentation that has pictures in it, and underneath some of the pictures, I might have other pictures. I mean, how many of us ever look at a PowerPoint and look at the images and start deleting them to see if something's hidden? Or to see on a page whether I put something in white font on top of a page with a white background. So I call this low-tech digital stego. But the reason I even mention it is because, of course, it can be found out, in some ways relatively quickly. It can't be found out with automated tools. It can be found out with human intelligence, which, of course, is very laborious and time-consuming. So that leads me to a phrase that I sort of cobbled together from others called time-sensitive steganography. And by time-sensitive steganography, I only mean that if I create a covert communications channel between you and me, it only needs to remain covert for the amount of time that it takes for us to, exchange our messages and then do whatever deed we're going to do. So the same thing can be said of weak cryptography or poor information security. If I want to keep a covert communications channel secret for only a week, because the message to you is we're going to do some act this Saturday, well, then if it takes the investigator or the analyst a month to break our covert communications channel because it's so weak, well, it doesn't matter, because it took a month to break something that only had a lifetime of a week.
Yeah,
so,
no,
so as I said, so I will talk more to really answer your question about the different types of stego.
Well, why don't we do this? Why don't we just take a break here, and we'll be back right after these messages.
Okay.
All right.